everyone, welcome back to Heartbeat Narratives. My name is Mālama Maunalua and I'm your host. Today I'm incredibly excited to welcome my friend Dube, who has so many interests, but today we're diving deep into his love of wrestling, professional wrestling. This hobby of his has really taken over our friend group. We are totally obsessed with watching him and cheering him on as he takes on a new persona. Would you like to share your...
Yes, sure, Molly. This is the naturalist Natron Richards here, aka the Natural I.S.T. I appreciate you so much for having me on today to talk a little bit about my love for professional wrestling, a story that has deep ties to my childhood and my upbringing and can't be told without the background of conservation, environmentalism, and most specifically, invasive species management. So I'm really excited that you are giving me this opportunity to discuss a few things that I absolutely love that keep my heart beating. I can't wait to dive in.
Thank you so much for being here. I feel like the more I learn about you, the more I realize how you have very specific interests that are just totally fascinating. Your love of a good hot dog, your love of wrestling, your love of essentially saving the planet, and you're just an extremely good friend.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and the same goes for you, one of my favorite people all time. The reason for my most favorite vacation ever and the best wedding I've absolutely ever been to in Stavanger, Norway. And yes, I do have a bit of an eclectic collection of tastes and hobbies, and really what it comes down to is me working to allow myself to be myself, which is not something that's always come easy to me. I don't think it comes terribly easy to a lot of folks, but it's also really steeped in my passion, my dedication, and my will to help protect the planet. Because while this is a little bit of a selfish endeavor for me to fulfill my childhood dream of becoming a professional wrestler, it's also a vehicle for me to continue to spread awareness about conservation issues, about sustainability issues, and things that we can all be doing a little bit better to help protect this planet that we not only love but depend on to exist. I'm very excited to answer any of your questions. I think I would just really like to provide any kind of context that will help folks understand that you can incorporate your interests, your love, and your passion for things that are really going to benefit society, benefit this planet. And I think that's a take-home message that I learned maybe about a decade ago. And it's really helped me frame my lifestyle and my goals and what I want to accomplish in my life. And if this conversation can help anybody else start to frame that for themselves, I count it as a win.
So tell me, where did you grow up?
I've been a bit all over the place, but I was born and raised for a good majority of my childhood in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is a seacoast town. A good amount of my family is from the New England area, specifically New Hampshire, or as they say there, New Hampshire, including my grandfather, who is a huge influence on my life and on my wrestling career. He's from a very small town at the tip of northern New Hampshire called Colebrook. Very small population, lots of wilderness there. Really good memories growing up with my grandfather that involved both the outdoors and professional wrestling, actually.
So he was a big wrestling fan, I'm guessing?
Fan might be a little bit of a stretch. He was a very big fan of his grandson, I think, and that's where it all starts. His youngest son was a teenager when I was, toddler aged, and he was very into pro wrestling, the Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, some of those days in the late 80s, early 90s of WWE, and he actually took me to a live event at WWF. It was WWF back then, before they transitioned into their new entertainment conglomerate. And while I don't quite remember it because I was so young, I think that was kind of the kickstart of my love of pro wrestling. And my grandfather, rest his lovely, hilarious soul, was big into allowing me to kind of dictate how we hung out. So when I wasn't out fishing and running around like a terrified toddler of a squirming fish on a end of a hook, we were going to the video store, the local video store in small town Colebrook, and I was renting old WrestleMania pay-per-view events on VHS. You know, watching them with him in his living room, I can still remember those times very vividly, where he would have a nice cocktail and a big smile on his face, just getting a real kick out of watching his grandson get so worked up over this professional wrestling. I don't know if he would admit that he was a fan, but deep down, you know, I think he was a big fan by the end of it.
I love that. The fact that you can trace this back to when you were a kid is such a beautiful thing, because you shared it with someone that you love, and that has grown into like an adult obsession in a way that you've really taken on and kind of sparked that interest again in so many other people here in Hawaii who have attended your matches and really rallied around you and conservation. I could not believe that there were like 7-year-olds heckling wrestlers, and then that you came out into the ring holding a native plant. It was such a strong visual that I don't think I'll ever forget, and just the crowd going insane. And so, like, what does that feel like when you're out there?
Yeah, big shout out first and foremost to all the Natural I.S.T fans out there. I'll tell you, the first time I stepped out on that stage, definitely a lot of butterflies, a lot of nerves. While I was very well trained by my trainers over at the Oʻahu Samoan Training Center, world-renowned professional wrestling family, world-renowned training center that is a real feeder for ʻōhiʻa pro wrestling. To be honest, the first time I stepped out onto the stage and into the ring, I didn't really notice the crowd too much. I was so locked in and so focused on having my debut match and trying to perform to the best of my abilities. And it was great to hear the feedback that folks were really latching onto my character from a very early standpoint. And at subsequent matches, you know, I started to really notice them more as the butterflies started to tame themselves, so to speak. And that allowed me to interact with the crowd more, which is a really important aspect of professional wrestling. We're there to entertain, and we're there to do so in a way that is going to take the crowd, take the audience on a roller coaster. One of the things that I love about professional wrestling that I don't think a lot of folks understand or give credit to is that it is an incredible vehicle for storytelling. And that's not just in the little vignettes you might see between matches on stage or on a big screen at a live show. That's actually in the ring. When you are going against one or multiple opponents, you're telling a story. Oftentimes it's a story between good and evil. It can be a story of revenge or retribution. So after getting those initial butterflies out, being able to really interact with the crowd and show them, demonstrate to them more of my character, that allows folks out in the crowd to better identify with me and identify with my messaging and latch onto that character. A lot of that character and messaging being directly tied to my work in conservation and my love and passion for protecting the planet and helping restore things like ecosystem health and watershed functionality to Hawaii, but not just Hawaii. I want to be able to provide that messaging on a national and even global scale someday. So that's part of my goal with professional wrestling, and for opportunities like this with Molly, one of my favorite people, to talk about these passions that I have and hopefully grow that audience and build a community that is a little bit better informed on environmental aspects while enjoying themselves at an artistic showcase like professional wrestling provides.
I think about how when we're trying to spread the message of caring about the environment and so forth, oftentimes we're like sort of preaching to the choir, but through wrestling, I think you're reaching a totally different audience for folks and giving folks the chance to care about something that maybe wouldn't have been first nature. They love wrestling, and then they like learn to love your character, and then they pay attention to your cause, which I think is a unique way of telling a story to folks who may not have naturally come across you or caring about invasive species. Could you tell folks about your day-to-day work and what you do?
Sure, yeah. So I've been dedicating the majority of my life to conservation, more or less since I left college. So I got started with an organization that a lot of folks are probably familiar with. I know that you're familiar with them. They're called Kupu. And I was fortunate enough to come across them during a career day at the University of Hawaii on my lunch break. And what that did was open my eyes to an industry that I knew existed, but I didn't quite know the details of. So getting familiar with Kupu and being provided an opportunity through Kupu to kind of direct my passion, that was really the key Kickstarter for me to get into environmentalism, conservation, and invasive species management as a career. So after Kupu, I was offered a position in outreach with a Native Hawaiian organization called ʻōhiʻa, who does a lot of wetland restoration, and primarily wetland restoration through the management of loʻi. And that had a profound impact on me, not only from a conservation environmental standpoint, but also from the cultural aspect, and really helping me develop respect for the Native Hawaiian community, the way that ancient Hawaii managed their natural resources, because I think still to this day, even with all of the scientific advancements and the new technologies and innovation that we're developing and directing towards our conservation efforts, back then they were some of the best land managers you could think of. And we can still take a lot of those lessons from those folks. So that has been a huge component in directing where I wanted to spend my career and what I wanted to do with my life. After that position, actually, an entry-level field position opened up at the Oʻahu Invasive Species Committee. Simultaneously, there was a posting for some job openings at a great nonprofit organization called Mālama Maunalua, and I took the opportunity to jump on both of those. I started working out in the forest with the Oʻahu Invasive Species Committee, aka OISC, just hiking around, camping, flying in helicopters, looking for some of the worst invasive species in the world. Hawaii being as remote as it is, being an island, invasive species becomes one of the premier issues for our community. It's not just the ecosystem health, although that is a very important component. It's also the costs of things, of controlling some of these species that can cause very substantial and dramatic harm to our communities. One of our target species is Myconia calvescens, aka the purple plague. Some folks call it the purple cancer. It's been devastating for forests in Tahiti. We share a very similar ecosystem as Tahiti. And if we want to protect our natural resources here, we needed to take action, and that's one of the target species that my organization, which I now manage, focuses on. There's about 100 invasive species globally that are categorized as the worst invasive species in the world by the Global Invasive Species Database, which is facilitated by the IUCN, or the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And on that list, we currently are dealing with 4 of those species. 4 of the worst invasive species in the world, OISC is directly managing. That type of work is incredibly important, and all the folks that work at OISC, whether it's the folks out in the field, the boots on the ground, where I started, doing the actual labor to hike through and detect these very dangerous plants or pests of the forest, like little fire ant, like rapid ʻōhiʻa death. These things become incredibly important, or all the way up to the outreach folks. We have an incredible outreach team that does an amazing job of informing and educating our communities about the threats of invasive species, the impacts that they can have, what folks outside of OISC can do in their everyday life to kind of minimize the spread of these species and help us towards eradication. So all of those folks, we all serve our purpose and our role at OISC to really help protect the forest from these major impacts of invasive species management. And then in terms of Mālama Maunalua, such a great organization that was founded because community members saw what was happening to the nearshore marine environment, and they wanted to do something. They wanted to jump into action. So being able to jump into that organization and help them do the incredible work of cleaning up that particular area, the Paiko region of Maunalua Bay, that has been an immense component of my life and something that I'm truly grateful for, not only for the people that I've met and the friendships that I've forged through that, but also knowing that conservation just doesn't happen in the mountains. It doesn't just happen in the wetlands. It also happens in the ocean, and you really have to take a holistic, cumulative approach when discussing conservation and all the efforts that are ongoing. So to be able to have a little bit of an impact in terrestrial conservation through OISC, while partnering with Mālama Maunalua and being able to have that marine impact as well, to me that brings things full circle.
What are the benefits for protecting our native forests that residents can wrap their minds around? Why is that so important?
Molly, that's such a great question. Could I just give you props for your amazing questioning here? Native forest provides an incredible benefit to our communities. Something that I like to tell folks is, regardless of your political stance, regardless of who you vote for, everybody needs clean water to drink. Everybody needs clean air to breathe. You can't have a political platform. You can't have a life. You can't exist without these things. The forest is what helps provide these things for us. So when OISC and a lot of the other movers and shakers in conservation, whether it be the watershed partnerships, whether it be some folks at the federal level, what that is doing is that is helping protect our water supply as well. I mentioned Miconia earlier. One of the reasons that that is considered one of the 100 worst invasive species in the world is because that species in particular tends to exacerbate stormwater runoff, which then also exacerbates flooding, more makai from the Malka infestations that happen. When you get that flooding and that stormwater runoff, that's water that would have otherwise been directed to an aquifer. And as many of us know, especially with the Red Hill topic that's been very prevalent and rightly so in the news the last several years, we need those aquifers to be uncontaminated. We need them to be full of clean, fresh drinking water. Doing things like removing Miconia from the landscape, that allows native species that otherwise would have been crowded out by these invaders that can often grow at a much quicker rate than they can because they arrive here unnaturally and lack the predators to keep their populations in check from their home range, helping become that level of predation, so to speak. That allows native species, native forest species, to fill in where the areas that Miconia may be taking over. So one of the key examples that we know that research has showed us is that if our ʻōhiʻa trees disappear, these ʻōhiʻa trees are a pioneering species. They're some of the first species that pop up on lava fields to start colonizing a forest. They're a crucial building block of Hawaii forests. If these trees disappear, some of the species that are most likely to replace them in the landscape are trees like Miconia and strawberry guava, who folks may have a more familiarity with. These species do not come close to directing the amount of water to the aquifer as ʻōhiʻa does. And so protecting ʻōhiʻa, whether it be working scientifically on solutions that involve the ceratocystis fungal pathogens that cause rapid ʻōhiʻa death, or whether that be taking management action against other invasive species that are threatening ʻōhiʻa. These are actions that are incredibly important to the forest, and without that ecosystem functionality, it threatens our communities on a number of levels, be it economically, be it from an agricultural standpoint, be it resilience to other forest pathogens or pests. Because if we start to lose our forest and the diversity in our forests, the native diversity, we're going to start to face some very hard truths about food security, about water availability, and about quality of resources that we really depend on, like food, air, and water. So protecting the forest is of paramount importance. And I encourage everyone to help support that in their own ways. Sometimes that can be limiting your plastic purchasing, limiting your water usage. And these might seem like real manini small kind things, but if everybody does a couple manini small kind things, if everybody can help support organizations, businesses that do promote more sustainable outlook, a more conservation and environmentally friendly outlook, while making small changes in their own lives, that's really what it's going to take, because we're at a tipping point for protecting this planet. And while we are starting to ramp up, I think, on a community level here in Hawaii, on a state level, and to a certain degree on a national level and global level, we're still not doing enough. And I promise that we can save the planet, but we have to pull together, and we have to do it the right way, and everybody has to contribute. And I think there's a reason for everybody to contribute. So that's one of the reasons that I take conservation into my pro wrestling. If I can reach that new demographic, if I can reach that new audience, if I can help them, bring them along into this ideology of taking care of the planet because it takes care of us, then I'm doing what I set out to do. We'll keep building those new audiences in both scenarios, for both the professional wrestling industry here in Hawaii as well as the conservation and environmental industry.
I can hear the passion in your voice, and I can see it in your eyes. Why do you think you care so much?
Oh boy, Molly, what a question. Why do I care so much? I think a lot of it comes down to my upbringing, of course. I've faced a fair amount of hardship, and a lot of folks face hardship in their life, and I'm not unique in that way at all. I think what has helped me is, in that hardship, I had some great family that really helped develop my outlook and my perspective, and that informs responsibility. And I think it is a responsibility for all of us to take care of our natural resources and to take care of our planet, because science and research is unwavering in telling us that most of these issues are human caused. Regardless if we're causing more or less of the issue, we all have to be pulling together to help resolve the issue. I had parents who really drove home right and wrong. I had great support from grandparents, from aunties, uncles, just a very great family dynamic to help shape my perspective. And a lot of those perspectives and responsibilities and ownership for these things was shaped in the outdoors. My dad is a big outdoorsman, whether it be bow hunting in his younger days, hiking. He hiked the Appalachian Trail. And so a lot of that is steeped and framed within my upbringing. I also have to be honest and say, a little bit of his ego, because if I don't feel like I'm doing something that's helping, it's very hard for me to wrap my brain around that. And I do believe that that's ego. Now, it might be, responsibly placed ego, but it's still ego. At the end of the day, I think my childhood, my upbringing really helped shape what responsibility means.
I'm just really glad that there are people like you out there who do care so much, because I remember when I started at Mālama Maunalua and you were one of the senior community huki leaders, and when I heard you speak to our volunteer groups, it was just so obvious that you were doing what you were meant to be doing. And now that your interests have spun off into even more creative endeavors, it's fun to see where you're taking it. Because there's no one else doing this, especially in Hawaii. There's no other pro wrestler, conservationist, that is rallying new people and people who love the environment already around a shared cause.
Well, to be honest, what I've heard is from other wrestlers, the way that the industry works is essentially, unless you are signed on to WWE, the biggest wrestling company in the world, you're essentially an independent contractor. A lot of folks fly around and travel around, and most of them live on the continent, and they're wrestling different companies, different promotions, 3, 4, 5 nights a week to help them develop as a wrestler, but to also help them build their resume. And it's a career path for many folks. So we get fly-ins from all over the place, and we've had some big names fly in and be a part of our show because the owners of ʻōhiʻa Wrestling are very well connected. They've been in the professional wrestling industry for decades. They know how the business is supposed to run, and them bringing in some of this talent from elsewhere and allowing them to see, oh wow, there's a blossoming, very intriguing professional wrestling scene that has honestly been going on for a little while here in Hawaii, but is starting to definitely ramp up now with ʻōhiʻa Pro Wrestling. And I do get comments from those fly-ins that like, wow, this is a very unique character I've not seen in the business. We call it a gimmick. For me, it's much less of a gimmick because it is who I am. But it would still be considered a gimmick by the definition of pro wrestling, I think. But hearing from them that this is completely new, this is unique, this is not something they've seen before, that's great feedback for me. I do want that. In order to stand out in professional wrestling, you have to be unique. You have to break preconceived notions while still understanding the way that the industry works. And I'm grateful to my trainers and to the owners of ʻōhiʻa Pro Wrestling and a lot of the veterans there who have, taken me under their wing and helped explain this kind of thing to me, because helping me to better understand the professional wrestling industry and what works there, that is going to directly impact my success of delivering the messaging around conservation and environmentalism. This is two ideas that I think a lot of folks wouldn't have married in their own minds, but in my mind they are completely directly intertwined, and the success of one for me is the success of the other. That's what I set out to do. Doing okay so far with it. We got a good start, but it's just a start, and I need to keep that momentum building.
Is there a specific moment or story where you're like, this is what I meant to be doing, that just like defines why pro wrestling is a passion for you?
Ooh, boy, Molly with the hard-hitting questions. I should have expected no less, small.
These weren't in my texts to you ahead of time?
No, but I knew they would be coming. They're very good questions, and you're an excellent interviewer. A singular moment, geez, that might be a little hard for me to nail down. I will say that when I am out in the crowd and I have brought my native plant for the day, whichever species that may be. I've brought an ʻaliʻi, I've brought an ʻōhiʻa, I've brought an pohinahina, I've brought a number of hibiscus species. Once I've come down to the ring, once I've had my entrance with my native plant friend, and I pass that friend off to a kid in the crowd, that's typically the go-to. Watching them light up, hearing from their parents that they sit in specific areas so that they have a better chance of getting the native plant that I hand out, hearing the follow-up from the kids and from their parents after they've taken it home, after they've outplanted it in their yard, and after they've been directed to do some research on how to take care of the plant, which then leads to more information and education for them about native plants, about the forest, about healthy ecosystems and healthy watersheds. That all fills my heart and shows me and tells me, like, I'm meant to be doing this. And this is really, I'm starting to achieve the goal that I had set out to do years and years and years ago. From a pro wrestling standpoint, I can point to, I've had a number of big time victories. They started calling me the Giant Slayer. Anybody who knows me knows I'm not exactly blessed in the height department. But to have a number of victories over the giants at ʻōhiʻa Pro Wrestling, many of them standing over 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", weighing well over 300 pounds, some of the biggest, scariest men that you could imagine standing across from. Having some of those victories, while it is great, the moment in pro wrestling that I really felt like this was what I was meant to do was actually a loss for me. And it was against one of the biggest pro wrestlers in the history of Hawaii, Aleki Afi, he goes by now, formerly Aleki the Pineapple King. I had won one of my said matches against a giant, That entered me into the Dragon Ball Z themed battle royale with all the other folks who had victories that night. At the end of that battle royale, which was the main event for the show, it came down to 2 people, and that was me and that was Aleki Afi. Despite my best efforts, despite my best fights, that big Samoan man picked me up and slammed me through a table. And anybody who was at that show, I can remember hearing their gasps as the table shattered underneath me. And for anybody thinking pro wrestling is fake, I want them to get in a ring and get thrown through a table by a big, mean pro wrestler and tell me if the pain that they feel is fake. That moment, despite writhing in pain on the mat, being able to give it my all, being able to give everything I had to the crowd, even to give everything that I have to my opponent, that pain was a reminder that I'm still out there fighting. I'm still working. And no matter how down we get, whether it be in a professional wrestling ring or whether it be battling the forces that are trying to continue harming our planet and our natural resources, you just got to recognize that some of those painful moments are moments of growth. And some of those moments of growth show you and can demonstrate to you that you're still alive and that you still got some fight in you, which is really important for both professional wrestling and environmentalism.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're very welcome. And Aleki, I'm going to get you next time if you're listening to this. I just want you to know that.
I have this vivid image in my mind that I remember seeing you catapult yourself from the ropes into the arms of 2 giant men at Hawaiian Brian's. And I was like, I never thought I would see Nate flying through the air and get caught by 2 humans that were just so massive.
Yeah.
And all of our friends were just like, and then you were totally fine. But I imagine this takes a big toll on your body. How do you work in the fields all day? I know you're also balancing office work, and then wrestle. How do you create time to do both?
Molly, it's like you're a gold medal interviewer here. Excellent question. Fortunately for me, in terms of my body's ability to withstand this type of punishment, I'm not out into the field as much, nearly as much as I used to be. It used to be 40 hours a week, rigorous hiking, up to 10 miles a day, with a heavy pack full of tools, lots of shifting, lots of back aches, lots of rolled ankles in the field. I don't know if I would be able to keep up with professional wrestling if I still had that rigorous of a field work schedule, but considering my newer position as the manager for OISC, which is mostly based in strategy and fundraising, but does still involve field work. It's really trying to take care of your body in terms of flexibility, which I'm still trying to improve. A lot of folks out there don't know that starting, you might guess, but starting a professional wrestling career in your mid-30s is not the typical time when you start a professional wrestling career. While I'm getting a late start, my body might not be what it was 15 years ago. And there's also not all that wear and tear that I've had for the last 10, 15 years that another professional wrestler might have. But making sure that I'm in the gym, working out at least a couple days a week, maintaining my strength, maintaining that muscle endurance. One of the things that pro wrestling has really taught me, and that being out in the field and hiking 8 hours a day has really taught me, is you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, kind of, and you have to be ready to use your passion, use your dedication as willpower. Being your own cheerleader while also being realistic about your capabilities, that really helps. But for me, at the end of the day, I'm pushing through because I believe what I'm doing is very important. That's why, one of the reasons why I need to be doing something, I need to be having a career that is having an impact, because without it, I don't know that I would be very motivated. Money isn't the main motivator in my life. Helping the planet is. on a personal note, proving other people wrong is a very important motivator in my life. And whether that's somebody saying, oh, I don't think you can handle that line out in the forest, that's too difficult, that terrain is too tricky, and me showing that even in my elder stage that I can still perform at that level, or whether that be stepping into the wrestling ring when folks think you're too old, or you're too slow, or you're not tall enough, or you don't have the right physique, or whatever that is. That is a very key motivating factor in my life, because I like to prove those people wrong. So, like anything, there's a variety of components in my decision making, but I think all of those things work in concert together, for me at least, and help push me to be the best that I can be, whether it be pro wrestling or whether it be conservation.
I want to invite Natron Richards to close it out for us. Where can we see you? Where can we cheer you on? Tell us a little more.
Very much appreciate that question as well. Maybe your best question so far today. Typically we have shows on Thursday nights. The next show is January 16th at Hawaiian Bryan Social Club. You can get tickets at oosprowrestling.com. They should have a link to the Eventbrite tickets. There's really not a bad seat in the house, but once you get up in that front row, you're right in the middle of the action. And for the Naturalist, Natron Richards, for the Natural I.S.T, you can find me also on Instagram. That's where I am the most active, and that's at the Natural_IST on Instagram. And I also share a lot of announcements about Oʻahu Pro Wrestling and about some of the other opportunities that I've been provided in pro wrestling outside of Hawaii. I recently wrestled in Anchorage with 907 Pro Wrestling, great promotion out there, lots of great talent, and I look forward to having more opportunities for pro wrestling elsewhere. And on my Instagram, you'll also see me sharing quite a bit about invasive species management, conservation, and ways that folks can be more sustainable and ways that they can help our conservation efforts island-wide.
Thank you everyone for tuning in, and can't wait to come to your next match.
Can't wait either, Molly. I'll see you there. And I'll see all you folks out in podcast land there too. The Natural I.S.T out.